What's up, Hope Church family? I want to welcome you to Kickoff Sunday here at Hope Church. In honor of the Super Bowl, we are calling this Kickoff Sunday, and we're wearing our favorite sports team's gear today here at Hope Church because we have so many great things that are kicking off today. If you don't know, today we are kicking off Next Steps. Next Steps is our process to help you follow, grow, and live for Jesus. If you want to find out more about Next Steps, you can just go online today, go to Next Steps, and find out all you need to know about our process. As well today, we're kicking off our spring semester of Grow Groups. And so if you want to find out more about Grow Groups, which is our small group structure, you can go online today, sign up for our Grow Group. We got Grow Groups that'll meet online, in person, every stage of life. For young adults, we got freedom groups, we got financial groups, we got Hope Church in Espanol groups. Whatever group you need, we got you covered today. So again, go online, find out what available groups we have still for you to jump into. And I want to encourage you to get into a group. We've been celebrating baptisms here today at Hope Church, which has been awesome. We also have all of our students coming back today from Walking Wisely Weekend, which is just an incredible weekend of hundreds of students locally coming together for an amazing weekend together. And so it's a big celebration here today. We're excited to have you with us. But before I go any further, I got one really important question to ask you, and I just want to see kind of a poll online right now as well as in-house. How many of us are cheering for the Bengals today? Come on, how many Bengals fans we got? How many of us are cheering for the Rams today? And so I'll be honest with you, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I'm cheering for Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I just want to see them pull it off. They're not supposed to be there, but you know what? If Matt Stafford and the Rams win as well, I don't really care. But I don't know who you're voting for today, who you're cheering for. I think it's going to be a fun Super Bowl to watch. But again, we're just glad you're here today. As well as all this going on today, we are in the second week of a teaching series called House of Hope. And I really want to encourage you, if you missed last week's message, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to last week's message because it really sets a foundation of really what we want our church to be. We said last week that we want a church that's willing to do whatever it takes to reach the next generation. In fact, we said our desire and passion is that we would be a multi-generational church that has a multi-generational impact. We believe that the next generation matters to God. So we're going to pour into the next generation so they can pour into the next generation. And for generations to come, we're going to keep pouring into the next generation. Now, we said in order for us to become a house of hope, then we have to be a church that's willing to open our arms wide open to the next generation and allow them to come into our church and really wrestle with some of the difficult questions of life, questions of faith, questions of gender, questions about sexuality. Again, go back, listen to last week. Because if we don't create a safe place of community for them to be able to ask those questions, then we send them out into a world who will gladly give them their version of the truth in answering those questions. But we have the hope of Jesus. We have the truth of Jesus. We want to be a church that sits down, gives the next generation a seat at the table to ask those questions. We're not afraid of those. Also, we can point them to the truth and the hope of Jesus. We've also said that we don't want just to create a house of hope here at a church, but we want your home to be a house of hope. We want your home to have a multi-generational impact. We want you to be able to create a home. We want to partner together with you to help create a home that will impact your kids or your future kids or your grandkids. Even if you're an empty nester and you got some grandkids right now, that your grandkids will be impacted by the hope of Jesus, and that their kids and their grandkids and so forth will be able to be impacted by the hope of Jesus. Now today I'm going to spend some time really talking about just the issue of parenting. And so if you're not a parent yet, this is still going to apply to you. If you're an empty nester and you got grandkids, it's going to apply to you. If you're a student, a young adult, a college student, and you're dreaming about the day that you'll be married and have kids, this will apply to you as well. And so I just want you to hang with us today. But I want to be very transparent with you. As I talk about parenting, it's so easy sometimes to come off as like a professional who's got it all figured out. And if you're just tuning in to Hope Church online or you're here today for the very first time, then that might seem the case. But if you've been around here for quite some time, I'm the most transparent, honest person to tell you that if you want to feel like a failure for 5 minutes, I've said this many times, just be a parent, right? You really want to get humbled, be a parent. And so we do not have it figured out. I am a fellow struggler in this thing called parenting. So I'm not preaching on a high horse today. I'm not preaching down to you. In fact, I am trying my very best, me and Becky, to apply what I'm teaching on today. But I do believe this. I do believe that the things that you and I value and commit to, the priorities we make in our home, are so important. And I get it, right? It is so hard sometimes to be intentional about our values and priorities because life doesn't seem to slow down, does it? I mean, again, I got 4 kids. I got 2 of them involved in basketball. I got 1 getting ready to start soccer this month. I got 1 getting ready to start softball. And so I know what it's like. My youngest son, Keaton, he's 7. Through all the bad weather we've had, they had a bunch of games canceled. So we have 3 basketball games this week. My oldest son, Brogan's got multiple basketball practices. He's got a tournament getting ready to come up. So we're just ping-ponging all around, right? And so it's so hard to try to be intentional sometimes because life doesn't allow us enough time to slow down and be intentional about much of anything. But this is the truth. The foundation we're building our home on, the values, the priorities, the principles, stats tell us is most likely the same values and principles and priorities that your kids and their kids will build their homes on. And in fact, really we'll look at in a few minutes, really it begins to slide. It begins to fade generationally. And so the lack of priorities and values we have now but start to drift down and they start to drift down and they start to drift down. And so we got to be very intentional about what we build our house on, what we build our values on, our principles on, our priorities on. And that's what I really want to talk about today. Last week we left off with a passage in scripture that I want to pick back up from today. And it really shows us what happens when you and I aren't willing to be intentional, when we kind of fall asleep at the wheel, and we assume the next generation would just grow up knowing about the things of God, prioritizing things of God, valuing the things of God. Let's pick up our passage here in Judges chapter 2, verse 10. It says, and at that generation also gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. And so last week we looked at, this is speaking of the nation of Israel. This is shortly after they had entered into the promised land. And the promised land had been promised them by God for hundreds of years. And so the first generation who goes in and reaps the promise of God, the provisions of God, the protection of God, that generation goes on cruise control. They don't value the right things. They don't make God a priority. And so as a result, 1 generation later doesn't know God. You say, how is that possible? How is it possible that 1 generation could enjoy the favor of God, live in the promise of God, and 1 generation later they could turn out worshiping other gods and turning their back on God? And I say it happens so easy. It can happen in a matter of weeks, a matter of months. So quickly, it doesn't take 30, 40 years for it to take place. It can take place in like 6 months, right? You say, what are you talking about? Look how quickly values and priorities shifted when COVID happened. I mean, just think about it for just a moment. You go back in 2019 and 2020, there were people who were journeying after Jesus and chasing after Jesus. And then COVID hit all of us, right? And it forced the church to react differently, and the doors were shut. And for so many people, what was once a priority quickly didn't become a priority. And now 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months later, right? What happens? All of a sudden, the things of God, church, is not the value and priority he once was. And all the while, there's this idea that when things slow down, when things finally can kind of get back to normal, then we'll get back to reprioritizing our home. And then you quickly discover life doesn't slow down. The hamster wheel keeps spinning, right? And all the while, we're trying to convince ourselves that we'll reprioritize at some point. And here's what we have to understand. If we don't make a decision today to change some things, then this is the truth. It will have generational impact. But the good news is that if you and I can choose today to make some changes, then it can also have some generational impact. So I want to encourage us today. Even though this message is going to be a little hard maybe for us to deal with because maybe it smacks us in the face a little bit. Maybe some of it's going to be hard for us. And I know this because I'm a parent as well. Sometimes it's hard to face the stern reality of where we are and what we've prioritized. But if we aren't willing to take a hard look at ourselves, then we just have to take a hard look at what we're reproducing and what our kids are going to value, our future kids are going to value, and what they're going to prioritize in their life as well. I want to give you a big idea today before we get any further as we really talk about values and priorities and principles. Here's the big idea today. Lack of the right priorities today results in a lack of the right priorities tomorrow. I need you to feel this. So you are the pace setter for your home or your future home. Even now as a college student or a teenager, you are setting a pace that you don't even realize will have ramifications on your life before you get married or into marriage and once you have kids. And so what you and I, the priorities we have in our life today, the right priorities or the lack of them in our life will also result in the lack of the right priorities tomorrow. On the flip side though, if we have the right priorities in our life today, it can result in the right priorities in our kids' life and in generations' lives to come. I want to just show you just the importance when you and I don't have the right priorities. How quickly it can begin to fade from generation to generation. Maybe some of you saw this on social media. I know it got shared for quite some time. It's kind of popular on social media, but it's called the dangerous 4-generation fade. And this comes from some Barna research that shows you how quickly the things of God, the values of God, the priorities of God can shift and fade. Here's the first generation. Its parents don't make church involvement a high priority for their kids. And if we could be honest, this is where so much of our culture is today. There are parents who their kids don't come to church with them, their teenagers don't come to church, the young adults don't come to church, because there are parents today who don't make church involvement a high priority. It's just an occasional event, it's a destination, it's a place that we go. As a result, those kids grow up and make it even less of a priority for their kids. So what it reproduces, the priorities that you have, the values you have, it gets lost with your kids. They end up having grandkids, your grandkids, who see it a less of a priority. Those kids grow up and make no priority for their kids the things of God or church. And so you just see in just a short timeline, all of a sudden, your grandkids grow up and all of a sudden, they don't have their kids in church. They don't show them the importance of God. Those kids grow up with no concept of who God is. This right here could just be a 30 or 40-year window, right? So when we ask, how could this happen for the Israelites? It's right here. It starts with us today. It starts with us as teenagers and young adults and young married couples or engaged couples or dating couples, grandparents, whatever it is, it starts with us. The things that we place high priority and price tag on, it matters, right? It matters. It matters. It happens so quickly if we're not careful. We wake up one day and the years go by. We think we have all this time with our kids. You'll think you'll have all this time when you have kids one day, right? And you'll wake up one day like I did, and I got one that's 13 years old, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got 5 years maybe before they're off to college. And all of a sudden that window gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Let's be honest. It happens so quickly, but life has this way, and the enemy is so slick, isn't he? He has this way of numbing us to the reality and pace of life. And so it just starts with like, oh, it's just one Sunday. It's not a big deal. We'll get back next Sunday. It's just been a week or two. We'll get back next month. It's just been a month or two. It's not a big deal. We'll reprioritize. We'll revalue. We'll shift things around. We'll get back. It's just been like a year. It's just been 18 months. It's just been 24 months. And all of a sudden, life just keeps going. And the priorities have shifted and patterns are set in. And what was once a priority is no longer a priority, and now it's no longer a priority in your home and your kids, and now they begin to model their life after that, and it moves forward, right? We have to model what's important. Priorities today affect priorities in the future. If it's not a priority now, it won't be a priority then. Again, I want you to hear me. I'm gonna keep saying it throughout. I'm not preaching to anybody today. My prayer for you is that the alarm would sound, right? And something would go off, and that you would choose to make some decision today to alter your home or your future home, to make sure that you are aligning yourself with the right values and priorities and principles to set your home up for future success and for generational impact. Listen, I've been around a really long time, and I hear this conversation all the time. You'll say, but Tad, my kids, my teenager, my young adult, they won't come to church, and I'm not gonna make them, right? Because we live in a world where we're not gonna make our kids do anything they don't wanna do. And here's what I would tell you. There is a huge difference between forcing your kids to do anything and leading your kids towards something. There's a huge difference. Listen, again, I'm not from some high horse. Do you think out of the 52 weeks a year that my kids every Sunday morning hit the floor running, so excited to come to church that they never not want to come? I mean, you think that happens in our house? No. Do we beat them over the head? No, there are times, when my student doesn't want to come back for Student Hope on a Sunday night, there are times where I'll let them win that battle. And I'll say, okay, we're not going to go tonight. But there are other times when they don't want to come, and I'll say, hey, you know what? We're going to go tonight. And they don't want to go, and we go. You know what happens so often is I pick them up afterwards, and the first thing they say is, I'm so glad I came tonight. And I'll say to them, aren't you glad that we made you go? And they're like, yeah, right? It's not always a battle. But here's the problem, is that so often when it comes to God and church, in our homes, if we could be really honest, the things of God and especially church aren't really a priority. I mean, for most of us, we kind of attack church where if we have absolutely nothing else to do with our week, if there's no other time that already isn't accounted for, if our calendar is completely empty and there's nothing, I mean absolutely nothing under the sun that could come in the way, we might go to church today, right? Let's just be honest. And so when church isn't a priority to us, when the things of God aren't a priority, when we make the things of God a destination, a place, a building, a 1 hour a week deal that we occasionally, sporadically attend or are part of, then we can't really be surprised when our kids and our teenagers don't see church as a value and a priority, right? We can't be surprised when they look at our lives and they say, well, it's not a value and priority to you, so why should it matter? But when you set a pace, when you begin to lead, and God is a priority in your home. He's not just a 1 hour a week priority. He's not just a destination priority. Church isn't just something you go to get your church fix, but it's part of who you are. And there is this culture in your house when the things of God matter, and we're gonna set a pace and we're gonna lead. So when we get up on Sundays, we go to church as a family because it's important, but it's not just about going to church so we get our religious fix. But when we come home, God's important. And on Monday, God's important. And on Tuesday night, God is important. And in the middle of the week, God's important. And when God becomes a priority in our life, it sets a pace. No, it doesn't mean there isn't gonna be battles. No, it doesn't mean there isn't gonna be days when they don't wanna do what you want them to do. But there's moments when you and I can lead. The problem today is, if I could be honest with you, is there's so much lack of leadership in the home. And you'll experience this if you're not a parent right now. Just wait, you'll feel the pressure. But I look around today and there are so many kids who are dictating and leading the home, right? So they determine the pace. They determine how busy the home is. They determine what priorities there are. They determine what they're gonna do and what they're not gonna do. And parents, we kind of exist with this idea that we're just here to serve our kids and make sure that they are happy and they have all that they want. And we forget that we're here to make sure at the end of the day that they know who God is. And they have a foundation of God in their life. Let me give you the problem today with our culture today and kind of where we are. Here's the priority, or the problem. The problem is we tend to value and prioritize the wrong things. And if you and I can't get gut level honest about this, because I'm preaching to Tad Grandstaff right now, if we can't talk about this right here, then you and I can't really have a conversation. Because if we could be honest, we all tend to value and prioritize the wrong things. Let's just be honest. Parents, here's what I would tell you. When our actions tell our kids that chasing a ball is a greater value or importance than chasing Jesus, that commitment to practice is a greater commitment than the church, then we can't be surprised when Jesus and the church are of no value or no priority to our kids. Let's be honest. Many of you will drag your kid to practice screaming at you because they don't want to go. Because you'll say, I paid for this, or you're going to go to practice. Hey, we signed up for this. You're not going to miss it. But you wouldn't think for a moment to get your kid out of bed and make church a priority. And I just want you to think about it. And again, you'll roll your eyes right now. Some of you will tune off. Some of you will change the channel, whatever it is, right? But let's just be honest about it. Let me just say this. There is less than a 1% chance that my kid and your kid are going to be a professional sports athlete. I think stats say somewhere around less than 3% of kids will play collegiate sports. But let me tell you this. There is a 100% chance that your child is going to stand in front of Jesus one day. I need you to feel that right now. And when they stand before Jesus, Jesus is not going to be impressed with their grades and their GPA. He is not going to be impressed with their batting average and their assist to turnover ratios. He's not going to be impressed with their recitals or their practice attendance or any of their personal achievements, their education achievements, none of that. He's going to be concerned about their souls. And you and I, we cannot force our kids to choose Jesus, but we can create a foundation where we prioritize and value the things of Jesus and we lead them to Jesus. Now, they are responsible and accountable for their souls and what they accept and receive, but our job as parents is to slowly and methodically teach and train our kids to wean their dependence off of us and to put their dependence solely on God. In fact, that's the definition of a godly parent, that we would get to the place where our kids would depend less on us and they would begin to depend solely on God. And that starts with what we prioritize, what you and I value within our homes. Again, that means that Jesus is not an occasional weekend hobby, that the church is not just some destination, That Jesus is not here to just magically fix all of my problems and bail me out so I can just get back to life, because after all, Jesus is just my fallback plan. No, either Jesus is everything or he's nothing. And our values and priorities speak that message louder than we'll ever realize. And so what you and I are willing to do as leaders, we often say this, and I didn't say this, probably somebody like John Maxwell said it or whatever, but he said that leaders go first. As a leader, you're called to lead your home. That means you go when you don't feel like it. You commit. You show them. You show them through the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, the ups and downs. Man, I want to chase after the things of God because it shows them the value and commitment when they go through the ups and downs and struggles of life as well. See, I showed you the problem. Let me also show you the truth. The truth today is that we always prioritize and value what is important. Every single one of us. Whatever's important in our life, whether it's ball practice, whether it's binge watching Netflix, whether it's scrolling on social media, whether it's the gym, I don't know what it is. We always prioritize and value what is important. You say, Tad, are you telling me that if I don't come to church on Sundays or tune in online, whatever it is, that I'm not prioritizing and valuing what's important? I said, that's exactly what I'm saying to you. It's exactly what I'm saying. If we don't show what's important, if we don't value it, then we will raise up a generation who will not see it as important as well. Now, I've been around long enough. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Tad, you're only concerned about the church because you're a pastor. That's the only reason why you're here. The only reason you're concerned about talking about church is because you pastor a church. And I'd say, that's not true at all. If you think the only reason why I show up here week in and week out is because I pastor a church, I can promise you pastoring a church isn't enough to keep me come back week after week. I honestly believe that the greatest vehicle in which the world might know who Jesus is the church. The church was given to us as a gift from God to train up, to equip, to encourage, to resource, to help us grow up in our faith and understanding of who Jesus is. Jesus himself said that he would build a church and that the world and hell couldn't stop it. You read through the New Testament and the church is so vitally important. Look at what Jesus says here. These are the words of Paul, but he's referencing back to Jesus in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. He says, husbands, love your wives. How much? As Jesus Christ loved the church. How much he loved the church? He gave himself up for the church. I think if Jesus was willing to die for the church, it's a pretty big deal. But if I could be honest with you, I get kind of antsy a little bit nervous to walk out and talk about the church because there's this idea that, oh, you're just trying to build your thing. This ain't my thing. This ain't Tad Grandstaff's thing. I'm not trying to build up my ego. I promise you, my ego died about 5 years into ministry. I show up here every single week because I believe in the power of the church. I believe the church is the greatest hope of our lives. It is the greatest opportunity in which my kids and your teens and our young adults may know who Jesus is. If I didn't believe that, I'm wasting my time and I'm wasting yours as well. The church matters. The church has to be of high priority in our life, and we've got to set the pace and the tone for our lives. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I can tell you this. The reason why church is a priority in my life is because church was a priority in my life long before I ever became a pastor. I had a privilege, and I know some of you didn't. I grew up in a home. My parents made church a priority. I just knew, we just knew because it was part of our culture that on Sundays we got up together and we went to church together as a family. But let me tell you something, church was not just a destination for our family. We were involved, we went there together, but throughout the week we were part of the work of God as well. We didn't make our relationship with God be dumbed down to 60 minutes once a week. My parents modeled, they weren't perfect, but they modeled what it looked like to chase after Jesus. I loved going to church as a kid. I loved going to church as a student. Not did I love going every Sunday. Come on, no, absolutely not. But I loved it. Even through the highs and lows of life, I loved going to church as a student. In fact, I've told this many times. I was in a small group at my time as a student, right? And I tell people, I'm here today in ministry because of my small group leaders. In fact, 2 of my small group leaders who mentored me when I was in middle school and high school are still my mentors today. That's the truth. 30 years later, they're still my mentors today. They made that big of an impact on my life. As a teen, as a student, I began to serve in the church. It gave me a purpose. I was serving in student ministry. I was serving in kids ministry. I was invested back into the things of God. My wife, Becky, her parents prioritized church. She gave her life to Jesus at a young age. She got involved in the things of God. She got involved in student ministry. She began to serve. She got into college. She made it a priority. When me and Becky got married, we didn't have kids and I wasn't in full-time ministry yet. We made a priority. We're going to go to church. So I would tell you, singles, young adults, dating relationship, engaged, young couples, this is why it matters. We said we want to build a foundation now for the home that we don't even have yet. So we went to church together. We prioritized it. We got married, we started having kids. At that time, I was in full-time ministry. My wife will tell you, she'll stand right before you today, and my kids will tell you, I do not put pressure on my family to be at church every time the doors are open. I just don't. I don't do that. I'm not like, hey, you're the pastor's wife, you're the pastor's kids, so you're going to show up and be at everything because that's what you're going to do. I'm not forcing them. I'm not trying to beat it down their throat. We lead them to understand it's part of who we are. But let me just show you, again, we're not perfect parents. My two oldest are in middle school, and both of my middle schoolers, they serve here at Hope Church. I did not force my kids to serve at Hope Church. Both of them serve at Hope Kids. My oldest son, Brogan, he runs sound for Hope Kids during the second hour service. My daughter, Maisie, in the second hour, she serves in Hope Kids. They love it. In fact, on their own, they'll have friends that invite them to spend the night on Saturday nights or to something on Sundays, and they'll respond to them, text message or on phone call and say, hey, I can't come if it means I can't serve on Sunday mornings. I didn't tell them that. I didn't put that in place. I'm not a perfect parent. I didn't do that. They love it. It gives them purpose. It gives them meaning. It shows them the church is important. Mom and Dad, if we aren't invested in the church, if we're not serving the church, if we're not prioritizing the church, then how in the world will the church ever be important to our kids? My two youngest, one's about to turn 10, one just turned 7. They ask us every week, when do I get to start serving at Hope Church? I want to serve like Brogan and Macy do. It shows purpose. It gives them a value. It gives them meaning. It gives them a reason to show up. As I said, there's a great difference between forcing and leading. You can create a pace. You can create a pace. We got to value what we set, the tone that we set in our homes. I want to give you just something to write down today. As we think about the next generation, we think about our home. Listen, the next generation matters to God, so we must show them Jesus. This is your responsibility. Parent, grandparent, future parent, you and I, we got to see the next generation as they are so valuable to God that we must show them Jesus. As I say these words, instantly I'm like, man, I fail this all the time. I fail this all the time. Because you think about your words, your actions, your attitude, your posture. I am the greatest example, me and Becky, of who Jesus is right now in my kids' lives. And if I can be honest with you, I don't know about you, I don't always represent him well. I don't. I lose patience, right? I yell a lot of times, right? I don't always represent Jesus, but what I have to learn to do is how to represent Jesus is I got to be quick to acknowledge, hey, I screwed up today. Hey, you know what? I failed. I'm sorry. I got to show them grace. That means there's times that the emotions flare up and you got to sit down, you got to have some conversations, but we fail this all the time. But we got to see it as important. We got to value, we got to show them Jesus. How do we show them Jesus? Values and priorities. Deuteronomy chapter 6 really lays out how we can create a pace in our home for values and priorities. Look what it says beginning in verse 4. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your might." Now, this should ring true to some of us if we know the words of Jesus in Matthew, because Jesus, when asked what the most important commandment in the law was, he refers back to this. He says, you should love the Lord your God with all of your mind, your heart, your soul. And I would ask you, do your priorities and values back up that you love God with all of your mind, all of your heart, all of your soul? Does it? It goes on to say this, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart." Now, when something's on your heart, it means that it's always there. You're always talking about it. You're always having it in conversation. It constantly comes up. It says, you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and there shall be frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. It says that this should be in constant conversation. The things of God, again, should not be something that they just hear about when they show up to church on Sunday mornings. It should be something that we're constantly talking about. In the car, riding to games. In the car, riding to school, right? At nighttime before they go to bed. Over meals. As we're talking through the day, we should find a way in every conversation everything that's happened in life, to bring them back to prayer, to what's important, to bring it back to the hope of Jesus, to show them that Jesus is a part of everything that you and I are going through, and that everything in our life matters to him. And so we bring everything back to him. That means that everything in our life needs to be filtered through the lens of what Jesus wants for us, of the priorities and values he has for our life. And if those things don't align with the priorities and values that Jesus has, then you and I have got to make some hard decisions. The Bible tells us that you and I should teach over and over our kids the things of God. Proverbs 22:6 says, train a child in the way he or she should go, and when they were old, they will not turn from it. Now understand, that's not some promise of God that says it's an equation. If you do A plus B, then your child will equal C. It doesn't mean that. But it says more likely than not, when you and I build a foundation of the hope of Jesus in our child's life, when they're old, like Tad Grandstaff, who rebelled hard against the things of God, there was a foundation inside of here. I saw what my parents valued and committed to. And as I was thinking about the next step of my life as a young adult, I began to think, I want that for my future. I want to have a home that's centered around the values and priorities of the things of God as well. You say, Tad, why is this so urgent for you? Why do I feel such an urgency? Well, there should always be an urgency. But let me just show you some stats that Barna Research gives us. Barna Research tells us that 77% of Jesus followers commit their lives to Jesus before their 18th birthday. I want you to see how tight of a window that is. So the best opportunity at reaching a child or the next generation for Jesus is before their 18th birthday. In fact, if you dig deeper in those stats, there's something called the 414 window. The highest opportunity is between the ages of 4 years old and 14. It's even tighter than that, of reaching your child for Jesus. Because by the time they're 18, they're gonna go off to college. And if they don't have a biblical worldview, they don't know church, they don't have values and priorities, it's hard to establish that. Let me show you what else it says. It says that 96% of Jesus followers commit their lives to Jesus before their 30th birthday. I want you to feel that for just a moment. The window is so narrow. We cannot just assume it's just gonna happen. We can't just assume it's gonna become a priority. We can't assume that our kids are gonna know about the things of God. We can't just assume it's right here. We have an opportunity and the next generation to say our best opportunity is from the time they're born to their 30 to pour Jesus into them, to value it, to show them what's important, to help them build that foundation. Because after 30, there's a 4% chance they will commit their lives to Jesus. That means it's on us. The pressure is on us. They are watching us. We are leading them to Jesus. We are leading them to Jesus or leading them away from Jesus. We have a decision to make. How are we going to lead our kids? How are we going to choose to lead our future kids, our grandkids? We got to show them values, what matters to us. I want to close with this today. I want to just rattle off to you just what this generation needs to see us value. What does this next generation need to see us value? Well, the first thing is they need to see clear values. They need to see us have some clear values in our life. They need to see that there's actually such thing as a value, that there are things that are of worth to us. Again, you know how valuable something is when you show how much worth it has to you, how much commitment you have to it, how much time you're willing to put in. We got to show them that there are some things in life that we prioritize and we value. So you got to ask yourself, if God is a priority, and church is a priority, and I believe in the church, then I've got to make a decision to show clear values to my kids. In a world where a value system is upside down, I am the pace setter for values. What else do they need to see valued? They need to see godly marriages. Godly marriages. The pressure is on marriages. The greatest example of Jesus, I already said, is in our homes. The interaction between husband and wife is so vitally important. They need healthy homes and marriages that are centered around the things of Jesus. Because if you do the stats, your kids will most likely have a marriage that emulates your marriage. So if you are someone who has a spouse that you have to drag to church who doesn't care about the things of God, stats prove that most likely your child will marry someone very similar who will have that same type of relationship, who doesn't prioritize and commit to things of God. But if you make church and God a priority, most likely they'll look for somebody who will make the things of God and church a priority as well. I want to talk for just a moment to godly dads and godly husbands, future godly dads and godly husbands. A few years ago, the Baptist Press did a poll, and it was very famous. It kind of went viral for a long time, and it showed the stats of just how the impact a dad has on the home. The stats say that if a child is a first-generation follower of Jesus, a child gives their life to Jesus, but nobody else in the home is a follower of Jesus, there's a 3.5% probability that the rest of the family will follow Jesus. Stats say that if a mom, a single mom or a married mom, gives her life to Jesus, and she's the first one in the family to give life to Jesus, there is a 17% probability that the rest of the home will give their life to Jesus. But stats tell us that if a dad commits to Jesus, if he's a first generation follower of Jesus, the first one in the home, listen to me, there is a 93% probability that the entire family will give their hearts and lives to Jesus. We have too many men that are being drugged to churches by their wives. What we need is to redeem a generation of godly men to step up to the plate and to lead their homes, their future marriages, to lead their kids spiritually into things of God. We have got to prioritize it. What else do we need to value? Healthy relationships. If you're a single parent, single mom, a single dad, we've got to show our kids the value of healthy relationships. That means who we date, who we bring in our home, who we allow to spend the night on the weekends. The friend circles we have is so important in our life. We got to value healthy relationships. What else we got to value? Commitment. In a world of inconsistency, we got to show what commitment looks like. Commitment means we show up even when we don't want to. Now again, I know it's a foreign concept. When I grew up, my dad was this way. If I committed to anything, my dad would look at me and say, you're not going to quit. So I could be a week into a brand new sport and I'd be like, man, this sucks. I went out. My dad's like, you're not quitting. I'm only a week in. I don't care. You committed. When you commit, it's your word. We live in a world today where people live in homes on average of 2 to 3 years. They switch careers every 2 years. On the average, person switches churches every year. I mean, this is where we are in our culture today. People change marriages every 5 to 7 years. We're not committed to anything any longer. Here's what I would tell you. Commit to God. Commit to his church. Commit to her. Commit to her. Commit to the body of Christ. Serve her. Give through her. Serve in the church. Show your kids the priority. Connect to her. Engage in her. Pray. Worship. Encourage. Equip. Grow up. Make it part of your life. Commit. Show them the value of commitment. Even when we're tired, we go in the ups and downs. Even when we're going through a difficult season, there is a commitment in our life. We trust in the things of God, not just when it's convenient, because we are committed to God, and you can raise up a generation who will commit to God in the ups and downs, in the highs and lows of life as well. What's the next generation need to value? Community. They are desperate for community. If you ask what the next generation is looking for more than ever, it's community. And when you and I don't value biblical Christian community, why will our kids ever value it? So when we don't partner with the church, we don't connect with the church, and I told you this, I'm not here to sell you on Hope Church today. If it's not Hope Church, then you have got to find yourself a body. You've got to connect to a group of people. There are amazing churches all over Alamance County. There are amazing churches online. According to God's word, you are supposed to be connected, partnered together as the body of Christ to a biblical community. If you're not serving in a church, if you're not connected to others in a church, if you're not partnered to a church, you are not giving through the church, then you are a disobedient follower of Jesus. So you are discipling kids that will be raised up that will be disobedient followers of Jesus as well. You say, Tad, I don't like that. Well, the truth hurts sometimes. And we got to be honest. Because if you pick up the New Testament, pick up the book of Ephesians, you cannot argue with me that God has called for you and I to be part of the church, to link up with others, to make time to grow with others. That's why we put such an emphasis on grow groups. Your kid, from the time they're born, all the way up to student ministries and to young adults, is part of a group. They are linked up in Christian biblical community. Are you, mom and dad, future mom and dad, are you making it a priority to be in community with others? You know what the next generation needs to see as value? Truth. They need truth. They do not need you to be their friends. Listen to me. They need you to be their parents. And as parents, you are leaders. We have so many parents in our culture today who it's like, well, I don't know. I don't want to tell my kid that I might hurt their kid's feelings. Let me ask you something. If you went to the doctor today, would you want your doctor to just coax you, or would you want your doctor to tell you the truth? If you had a condition, something was wrong with you, would you want the doctor just to send you out, making you feel good about yourself, but inside you got some disease or sickness that's gonna take your life? Or would you say, doctor, tell me the truth. Tell me what's really going on. You'd say your job, your responsibility is to tell me the truth. I would say our job as parents is to tell our kids the truth about life, about what's out there, about what they're looking at, about what they're scrolling through, about what they're talking about what they're exposed to, because the greatest influence of their lives are you and I. We got to tell them the truth, which means we have got to know God's truth, or we can't stand on it. The great news is that you don't have to discover God's truth by yourself. That's why God gave us the church, so we can partner together as adults and parents to be better equipped and resourced, to be able to teach our kids and our students the truth. Finally, this today, what do we know to value? It's authenticity. Our kids need to see that our relationship with Jesus is real, not perfect. I told you, I'm not a perfect parent, not a perfect spouse, not a perfect Jesus follower. I'm not a perfect pastor. So you know what? They need to see the reality that life is a struggle. We all strain, we lose battles. There's days we're weak, there's days we give in. There's days the enemy wins in our life. Talk to your kids about that. Be authentic with them. Show them the highs and lows and struggles, the pains of life, what you're going through. Show them your struggle in your relationship with Jesus, so that when they're struggling, they know that, you know what, it's okay to struggle in your relationship and still have an authentic relationship with Jesus. But show them that there's a real relationship, not a religious relationship, not a denominational relationship, not a pain, oh, we just got to go to church so I don't feel guilty relationship. Show them an authentic relationship with Jesus that's real. And we don't show that with our words. We show that with our life and our actions. Listen, my heart today, again, was not to beat up on any of us. My heart today was truly just to lay before us just what our priorities and values are, so that we could evaluate our own lives and our own homes and begin to ask ourselves some hard questions. Am I setting the right pace for my home to be a house of hope? Or am I on cruise control? Just assuming that my kids, my teenagers, my future kids, my future teenagers, whatever, my young adults may at some point know about the things of God. I gotta set the pace. I'm a leader. I go first. I gotta be committed. And I gotta show them the values that are important in my life. Listen, as a fellow struggler, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. Pray for us. As I say these, I know the attack's gonna come. As we speak this out loud, or we try to live this out this week, I know it's gonna come for my family and my home. We're a fellow struggler like you, so I'm praying for you. You pray for us, but you're not alone. That's the beauty of the church. We can partner together through Hope Kids and through Student Hope and through young adults here at Hope Church, through grow groups and life. We can partner together so we don't constantly feel like we're losing. But in the end, we can win this battle together. I believe that. I believe nothing is hopeless without God being involved in it. And so we put God in the middle of it. We build a foundation on him. And our homes don't have to be hopeless. They can truly be houses of hope. Our church can, and your home can. I want to pray for you today. God, today I pray that we would be challenged but encouraged at the same time today. Challenged just to face some hard realities about the truth of where we are and kind of where we are heading in our lives. God, I pray that we would just evaluate our homes. God, what have we made a priority and a commitment? God, are our homes built on a foundation of you? God, do we value those things? Are we committed to those things? Are we setting a pace in our home for our home now and for our future home? God, is your church important? God, is it just a destination? Is it just something we tune into? Or God, are we part of it? Significant role, God, being part of what you're doing, advancing your church, seeing it move forward, not because we have to, God, because we want to be part of your work, because we do believe it is the greatest vehicle in which the world might know who Jesus is. It's the greatest vehicle in helping to reach my teenager or my young adult or my kid. It's not the last ditch effort hope. It's a partnership relationship. I don't dump them off at church hoping the church can do what I don't do. It's a partner relationship of what I'm teaching and training at home, partner with what the church is teaching and training there, and we're in a relationship together to help better equip and build up the next generation to have a foundation built on the values and priorities and the things of God. God, we are all fellow strugglers. We all feel like we get it wrong more than we get it right. I pray that you would encourage us today. You let parents and future parents believe that in you today that it's possible. Maybe they didn't see a model of a godly home before, But God, maybe they're the first generation followers of Jesus, God, but you're going to restore, God, and build up a future generation out of them, because there are some people who are willing to go out and blaze trails that their family never blazed, to be able to create a path for future generations to come behind them and experience the hope of Jesus. God, we ask that you would do a mighty work in our homes, and that, God, you would truly build this church as a house of hope, and that our homes will be houses of hope. In Christ Jesus' name we pray. Amen.